Moving along. A couple of years back, I made a trip down to Texas to a symposium which covered a lot on the various kinds of live testing that was available for in research for chronic wasting disease. It wasn't just a good holiday for me. It was a chance for me to meet some very important people. One of the people that I did run into there at the conference is our next speaker, Dr. Bugai, who's a practicing veterinarian. And from what I can see so far, has probably had more experience with this than all the rest of us put together. So I thought, what better of a guy to come and talk to us and give us his perspective on it. As I said, he's private practice, he's not government. He's a guy who's making his living out of this, so he's going to tell us the straight truth as to what he's found out so far. So with that, I'll let Scott go up and he can tell the rest of the story.
My daughter gave me a quick lesson on how to work a computer the other night when we were working on this PowerPoint. A little arrow key to make things move for me. Thank you for that introduction. Give you a little history. I am a deer farmer, just white-tailed deer, from South Texas, south of San Antonio. I've got a herd of white-tailed deer, captive white-tailed deer, approximately 300 head, and been doing it for 18, 19 years now. It's kind of one of those things that's a passion that gets to be a habit, and just anything from government to legislation to regulation to actually doing stuff like what I went to school for is I think it's bred in me. I don't know what it is, insane possibly, but we had our first positive CWD in Texas in a captive herd in 2015, July-ish, thereabouts, and there was a trace-out herd from that herd that we knew was going to be depopulated. In all likelihood, that was what was going to happen. So I got with Dr. Cook, that's why his name is on this presentation. We said, hey man, let's go down to Bugai County, let's do some stuff. We had this idea this live testing was going to be something, and let's get in on the ground floor. And I forget how many head there were. There was probably in the neighborhood of 30 head that were direct trace-out animals of a known positive herd. And Dr. Cook is a former state veterinarian from Wyoming, so he's very familiar with CWD. In fact, we jokingly talk about CWD showed up in Texas just about 6 months after Walt did, and we jokingly talk about him bringing CWD to the state of Texas. But we got together with that herd, and Walt's the one who taught me how to tonsil biopsy and rectal biopsy. And then because those were not acceptable tissues by the agencies that determined, I guess USDA, we played with the lymph node biopsy, medial retropharyngeal lymph node biopsy. And I felt pretty certain that I could go in and get a piece of a lymph node. Wasn't certain that a deer would live afterwards. So we had 12 head that we could do the lymph nodes on that were old enough that there was if they had exposure, there was a decent likelihood that we would find, some positives. So I did one animal just to practice the technique to see what I could get one to live, and then came back a month or so later and did the other 11. And the fact of the matter is the lymph node biopsy, the only reason that the lymph node biopsy was significant was because that is a tissue that the USDA will, it's a validated test on a tissue, on accepted tissue. But in real life, it's not practical. The expense involved is too great for what you get. Where I think it will work is in a situation where somebody would have received an animal that was a trace-out animal, and you could go in and do a biopsy of a lymph node, and if it came back not detected, then I personally probably want to repeat that in another year, but I would feel confident that's an accepted test. Anyhow, that's where I cut my teeth on live testing and have done, I quit counting. I've done a bunch of them. At first I never thought that, how on earth are you going to do rectal biopsy on on a weight deer and shoot. I'm telling you, no way. I mean, they kick the snot at it, just trying to give them a shot. How do you go in there and cut out a piece of their hiney and not get the snot kicked at you? But the fact of the matter is, you can. They're amazing creatures. You can do it. You know, we worked 35 deer an hour through a shoot, collecting samples. Very, very efficient, very cost-effective, and a good tool. So we'll go through here. I'll share some of this stuff I'm going to breeze over because it has more to do with teaching people how to do the biopsies. I don't think that's the scope of this conversation, but we'll get to some numbers here in just a little bit. Live testing, it has become a reality in Texas. I got to applaud Texas for, not Texas as a state, but the agency that governs us as deer breeders for having an open enough mind to accept something that is you know, kind of out on the fringes. And they went so far as to make it part of our regulations. We have to test a certain number of animals per year. Our regulations call for having we have to test 80% of our eligible deaths. Eligible death defined as 16 months of age and older. But we also have a minimum. We have to have a 3.6% minimum. Basically 4 out of 100 deer. You got the hypothetical 100 deer head herd of age eligible. You have to have 4 deaths a year. If you do not have 4 deaths a year, you have one of two choices. They will make you non-movement qualified until you get enough deaths to catch up, or you can live test up at a ratio of 3 to 1. So if you needed 4 tests, if you live test 12 deer, you can then get movement qualified again. I think that's, my personal opinion, that's a little bit higher ratio than what's needed. And in fact, I believe the live test is for sure more accurate than the OBEX, in my opinion. Probably not as accurate as, when I say the live test, the rectal biopsy test is more accurate or more likely to detect CWD than an OBEX would be. But, you know, that's what it is. One of the misconceptions was people thought when we first started doing this, well, you know, just get a single test done and you know, I'm free, I'm clear on that. And live testing is not that way. Live testing is pertinent in numbers over time. The more heads you do, or the longer period of time that you do it, is where you start getting significance for live testing. There are 4 basic tests for TSEs: the third eyelid biopsy, which is what they use in sheep and goats, the tonsil biopsy, the rectal mucosal biopsy, and then, like I said, the medial retropharyngeal lymph node biopsy. You can do rectal biopsies, either awake or anesthetized. Tonsil biopsies, you have to have anesthetized. They will not let you, and I'll show you some pictures, you'll see why. The same old test that they do on the lymph nodes and the brain stems, the IEC test, is what they're doing on these samples of the tissues that we're submitting. We have to, this is a critical thing in the live testing, is you have to have enough tissue to have 6 follicles. Because they will not call a sample not detected unless you've got at least 6 follicles. And that follows the testing numbers that they use in the sheep and goat industry. In mule deer and white-tailed deer, tonsil and rectal is good tissues, but in the elk, only the rectal tissue is sufficient. Now, I don't have a lot of experience with elk. Where I'm at is we're whitetail country, and so most everything that I'm going to be sharing with you, not most everything, practically, realistically, everything that I've done with live testing is all on white-tailed deer. So this is an example of a position of the deer when you're trying to go into a tonsil biopsy. You can see with the mouth gag in, spreading the jaws. That's the angle that the head's got to be held at. What I found with these sample collection is having good health determines the success of the overall operation. You can't do it yourself. I mean, I can hold the deer myself, but I can't hold the deer and do the biopsy too. And having good hands, and we've developed some pretty good hands down in South Texas to do all these testing. Tonsil biopsy, you have to anesthetize the animal. You put the mouth gag in. You look in the back of the throat, you find the tonsillar crypt. You'll see a picture in a minute. You take a bite out of the anterior part of that tonsillar crypt. Then you go up in this hole. The problem with the tonsil, getting a tonsil biopsy, is that you're blindly grabbing tissue. And the thought, and Dr. Cook and I, we thought at first that we would be able to just look at tissue and say, yes, that's tonsil, not tonsil. My God, we went to vet school and we looked at stuff and we should be able to tell it. I'm going to tell you what, I can't tell fat from tonsil when you're looking at it grossly. So knowing the right location where to go is crucial to getting a good sample. The instrument that you use is this, I just drew a blank on what it is, but use a 6mm cup to get the tissue. I'm going to focus this is not part of this conversation. Let me just go on here. Again, here's the instrument. You see the instrument down there at the bottom. We're going in there, and you go in on one side, go to the angle of the other side, go up in the crypt and get there's the instrument in the mouth, going towards the tonsillar crypt, and that's what the tissue looks like when you get it out. Gel foam, that's the procedure for tonsil biopsy that's written up. I mean, this is not something new. The procedure talks about putting gel foam in there. I don't gel foam, ain't necessary, they do just fine. Advantage of a tonsil biopsy is that you ought to be able to pick up many of the early infections, finding the prions in the majority of the animals that are already infected. Some of them will fool you, yet it's still not 100%. And if we look for 100%, we're never going to accomplish that. The goal of this live animal testing is to mitigate the risk of environmental contamination and the risk of spreading the prions through unnatural movement, which is basically loading them on a trailer home across the countryside. The IHC in tonsil tissue is about 97% sensitive and 100% specificity. You can also, these tonsils, you can come back and repeat biopsy these animals on subsequent years. The tonsil tissue will multiply, and there's a lot of it there. You also got 2 tonsils, you can go one on each side. The disadvantage is that there is a learning curve. No doubt we had to train up a lot of veterinarians. Dr. Cook and myself went around the state of Texas and went to herds that would let us use their animals to train veterinarians in different locales around Texas. I was very surprised and just proud of the veterinary profession, how they stepped up. And if you'll see the numbers here in a minute on the slide, you'll see that, and I didn't do all of them, a lot of veterinarians stepped up and learned how to do this to meet the needs of the industry. The instruments, those box instruments, they cost me about $500 a piece. I can use one instrument on about 15 to 20 deer before it gets dull. Then it has to be resharpened. Obviously, you're not doing that out in the field. So when you go on a job, for instance, we had a job here the other day, came up and there was 700 deer to do. And so you figure how many instruments that you need. At $500 an instrument, I can get 20 deer. I can't do that math. I mean, it's a lot of instruments at my point. This slide is wrong, it's less than 9 follicles, it should be less than 6 follicles. That's going to occur, it happens to me. There's times you're just not going to get enough follicles. It's just the nature of the procedure. And then there's no immediate results. It's taken us now about 2 weeks to get results back. We're in a busy part of the lab is busy right now because of samples that were collected during hunting season. When the lab gets caught up, I can have results back using about 7 to 10 days. When the lab gets busy behind, it goes from 14 to 21 days. Rectal biopsy. This is one that most of the live testing done, I think, in the elk world. This is the one that y'all be using. You can physically restrain these animals again in a chute, or you can anesthetize them. There's a speculum you put in the rectum. You'll see that here in a second. There's just a location you go to as part of the training, you learn where to go, get your sample. One nice thing about the rectal biopsy is you can actually see the tissue. And I'll tell you, on rectal biopsies, once an individual is trained, if the animal has got follicles in their rectal mucosa, you would be hard pressed to not get enough tissue to get a good result. The only times that I'm getting insufficient follicles on rectal biopsies is one, if the animal is aged, and I say usually over 5. Once they get over 5, the amount of lymphoid tissue in the rectal mucosa is diminished. I have still gotten some not detected results, but you'll have a higher incidence of insufficient follicles. And the other time is running some of these deer in the chute, and they got diarrhea, they're sitting there just squirting all over you when you're trying to get, you know, you're working through a mess of diarrhea, trying to get a good sample, and I've gotten some insufficiency on those. This is what a rectal biopsy tissue looks like. You can see where the little dots are. That's where the lymphoid tissue is, lymphoid follicles are. And you just got to get adequate tissue for the pathologist to be able to see that. Another advantage of the instruments are cheap. Basically a pair of scissors and some thumb forceps. Very easy to train. Doesn't take, the learning curve is much, much faster. I tell veterinarians that you can either a cat, you can rectal biopsy a deer. Disadvantages is that that sample may or may not have the prions in there. Even an animal that is positive may not have prions in the rectal lymphoid tissue yet, especially in early cases. It's always possible that you don't get a sufficient sample. They have the 6 follicles. Now the disadvantages on the rectal is there's only so much red hymen you can cut out before you run out of tissue. They start back in real quick. I've actually had the luxury of going back. In fact, I'll tell you a story that happened on one. The guy had me come out, tested a bunch of his deer. The state had a deal where if you tested 50% of your herd, you could move up to what's called a transfer category 1. It just gets complicated. Our regulations are way more complicated. We've got transfer category 1, transfer category 2, release site 1, release site 2. And you don't want to be a 2. If you're a TC2, your deer are worth nothing. No one wants to buy them because they come with it, the mandatory testing in the pasture. No Texas landowner wants to test for CWD in their pasture. So everybody was wanting to move up to TC1. And by doing that, they had to test the 50% of their herd. This guy's going to come out. We could do it in two settings. We could test 25% and be given a temporary TC1 status as long as you finish the other 25% within a period of time. So I came out and tested 25% of his herd. Came back months later, 3-4 months later. We tested bucks in the fall, and then we came back in spring. We was going to test a bunch of does, and ran some deer through, and actually tested a buck. He had a buck he wanted tested. I'd already tested it. I looked at that deer's hind, and I couldn't tell that I'd ever been in there. The healing of this is amazing to me. The only time I saw complications with healing was I had one deer, and it also was a buck that. It was a deer that veterinarian I was training to do. He had done it, and I think he cut too much of the skin. He got too much skin instead of just rectal mucosa, and that deer licked excessively and caused a big sore there. It eventually ended up healing it. There's always a concern about contaminating between deer. You know, if you use an instrument and go to the next deer, I mean, it's impossible. But here's the reality is, you know, if you've got it in the herd, and what we're doing this as a surveillance tool, we're trying to see if it's in the herd. If you got it there, you got problems anyhow. I'm not really that worried because there's no practical way to decontaminate instruments between animals. It's literally impractical. What we'll do is we will clean instruments between animals by dipping them in I just use an Alvacin solution. We have used this SIP 100, but it's real tough on instruments, and you know, a $500 instrument it needs to last a long time to get your investment back. But we soak the instruments between, when I'm out on a big job, I'll have multiple instruments. So I have them soaking in one instrument holder, and then I'll rinse it and I'll use it and rotate them back and forth. When we're done with them, what I do with the instruments is I bag them, label them, wait for my results to come back. If you get a positive result, the state's going to come confiscate your instruments. You get not detect results, I clean them autoclave and reuse them. This live testing the sensitivity is affected by where they're at in the disease progression. Obviously, the further along they are there in the disease, the greater the chance of detecting it. These numbers, depending on who you talk to, what study you read, will depend on the numbers that you get. But I think these numbers are pretty accurate when you say early stage of disease. Well, what is early stage of disease? What is, where's that defined in a medical journal somewhere? It's not, but definitely I would say preclinical will be early stages. And I usually like the word they're infected, they're just not clinical yet. If it's early infection, this live testing, probably 30-something% sensitive at picking it up. Once you're into the later stage of the disease, or if they've been infected for a long enough period of time, it's 100%. This is just a statement. This is Dr. Cook, with the negligent biopsy testing 6 mule deer that died of clinical CWD 12 to 40 months post-biopsy, may be due to sampling too early in disease. Again, the early, they were experimentally infected with it in biopsy, they're probably biopsied too early. That's why they weren't picked up. That's a study that's out there. Here's a chart, and I'll tell you, we're working on something, we're kind of calling it the Texas model, and it's a way to, the USDA has a herd certification program. It's administered by Texas Animal Health Commission in Texas, and we are trying to get USDA to accept this model to become certified in a short period of time. And this chart is, it kind of shows, this is again from the USDA. And it shows on the left-hand side here, you can see the different genotypes. And it goes on a hypothetical 100-head herd. If there's one positive in the herd, and you test 100% of the animals, you got a 76% chance of getting it in that first year. What our model is proposing is that a breeder close their herd down for 1 year. We heard earlier about the environmental contamination and the increase in prevalence over time. And our feeling was, my feeling is that if you shut your herd down for a year, if you've got a positive animal in that herd, the day you shut it down, I say shut it down, you close it, no more animals coming in. You can still move animals out, but no animals coming in, so it's a closed herd. And you come back 365 days later and you test 100% of those animals, if you've got CWD, I think the chances of finding it are just astronomical. You can see over here, if you get over to the far left-hand side, if regardless of what the genotype makeup is, if you've got 8 infected animals, it's 100%. Here's the question that I asked researchers. We talked about research earlier. I'm a licensed veterinarian, but what I found is researchers tend to kind of be in the top 10% of the class. They're the brains that can think that stuff. I graduated in the top 75% of my class, so I'm not a researcher. I didn't make the cut. But the point, I use some common sense, and you can look at this and say that if you've got one animal in your herd the day that you decide to close it, what's the likelihood of there being 8 positive animals 365 days later? I think it's great. From what I've seen so far with we've had 4 positive herds, let's call it 4.5. We've depopulated 2 of the herds. We have 2 herds left, and we're doing live testing on those herds. And the numbers are showing me that the numbers of positives that are coming back are unfortunately significant. But it makes me feel good that you could get to the certified herd status in a 1-year period of time. The USDA they're pushing for a little bit longer. I feel confident that at least 2 years. The thing is, you have to ask yourself from the industry and as a producer, is that too long to wait? And discussions are still taking place. Getting back to USDA, the tonsil and the rectal mucosa, they're not approved tissues. We have seen them be very, very reliable. I mean, including, we talked earlier about picking up an 11-month-old deer, only 11 months old. What is the incubation period? And this was out of a deer that was thought to be of the genotype that is the most resistant or least susceptible, I think is a better word for it. I always wondered, what's the difference between most resistant or least susceptible, and is there a difference? That's just semantics. I told you IHC is the test that's being done on the tissues. Our feelings are that Thompson rectal biopsy should be approved by the USDA. I think we should push for that as an industry. I realize I'm not in the United States at the moment, but I believe that everybody that's involved in the cervid industry needs to work together regardless of where you're at. Because we're not going to, there's two ways we're going to handle this disease. One is through resistance, or two is through prevention. There's nothing that I'm seeing on the horizon that makes me think there's going to be a vaccine out there anytime soon. I personally think that there is a more resistant, least susceptible animal out there, and that we ought to be looking for those animals and breeding for those animals and learning to live with this disease because it's never been eradicated wherever it's at. I don't know that I'll live long enough for this to happen, but I foresee at some point, as I've seen in the last several years, the more dots on the map of where CWD is. I think it's in a whole lot more places than where we know because it's you use Arkansas touting that they don't have CWD, They're doing some random sampling, 100 kill things. Boom, they happen to draw a black bean, get a positive. So we got to go in and look more. You go there and look more. They got a 23% prevalence rate. That was the question I was asking earlier. Here's Arkansas's got a 23% prevalence rate, and they had no idea they had a problem. That's why I was asking about, what is the, I've not had the luxury of seeing a herd progress to clinical disease to see over what time it takes. And in the wild, is that a significant thing or not? That was the purpose of my question earlier. And we already, it was kind of an ironic thing that happened is Texas Parks and Wildlife, which is our basic game and fish commission that regulates us, imposed these new rules on us, basically allowing or permitting and or demanding live testing be done. So deer breeders around Texas started doing a bunch of these tests. Next thing you know, I think it was the USDA called up and said, no, you can't do that, no live testing. We didn't have a set of regulations to get passed. It took 6 months to get that through, that put this on the industry, and then the USDA comes and says, no, y'all can't do this. So there was a big powwow between Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, Texas Animal Health Commission, Texas Veterinary Medical Diagnostic Lab, and USDA, and they allowed Texas to do this for 1 year as a pilot program. We were past that 1 year and ain't heard nothing else about it. Other than there's more talk about this being becoming validated and being used in the herd certification program. Here's some numbers I just want to share. Since 2012, which was when the first CWD positive animal was found in Texas, out in West Texas in the Waco Mountains, Parks and Wildlife has done approximately 46,000 tests, and the private sector has done about 94,000 tests. So we've done almost 140,000 tests total since 2012. This is both live and postmortem, ante-mortem and postmortem testing. In live testing, Parks and Wildlife has done 178, and the private sector has done about 26,000. You look in the private sector; those are all captive white-tailed deer. If you look at the captive white-tailed deer population in Texas, we keep about 100,000, on the high end, maybe 120,000 animals in the pen. And we've tested a significant portion of that. What the conclusion I'm drawing is that the captive industry in Texas does not have a CWD problem as an industry as a whole. If you look at the number of deer that are moved, we probably move, 20,000 plus deer a year across the landscape. And ironically, where it's found in the whitetail industry is all in one little central area around Medina County, Uvalde County, and Bandera County. So southern Bandera, eastern Uvalde, and western Medina County. And all of the positives are probably within 5 miles of each other, all in one general area there. The breeders that are in that area were huge breeders. When I say huge, we're talking about herds of 200 plus, even up to 1,000 or so animals in their herd that are moving a lot of animals around. And for the number of animals that were moved, I was really really concerned with all this live testing we were doing that we were going to find it, you know, dotted across the landscape. And we didn't find it, and we've done a lot of testing. And so if for some reason it's right there in that area, which brings up to the thought of the environmental contamination. You know, there's something in that environment right there. You know, I don't know. We have more questions unanswered than questions that we answered. This is something I want to make. You look at, we got total tests of 120,000, but we've got total deer tested at just shy of 100,000. And the reason for that is that some of these animals were tested by multiple tissues. So you get actual number of tests is different than the actual number of animals. So the total deer tested in Texas since 2013, the private sector's done over 63,000 tested deer. That's both inside the breeding facilities and in the pasture. We now have requirements to test deer in the pasture. If you are not a Class 1 release site, you have to test up to the first 15 animals harvested every year. This goes on through the 18-19 hunting season. So we did it last season, this season. We've got one more season, and we're going to see what they're going to do to us after that. These are just some numbers here. And the reason I put these up here is because I got numbers from two different places. I get numbers from the diagnostic lab who actually runs the test. Then I get numbers from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. And those numbers haven't always coincided. So just out of fairness, I did this presentation of the USAHA, and Parks and Wildlife folks there said that my numbers weren't right, so I put their chart on there. I got numbers from a lab. The total number of the totals are pretty close, but the breakup is a little bit different if you look at the lab numbers and the agency numbers. But a lot of tests. I mean, 131,000 tested animals is significant for Texas. This is a picture showing where deer have been sampled across the state. These are the positives we've had. There's been a total of 85 positives. 62 have been in captive facilities. We got 4 facilities there. There's actually 5 different facilities. One of the facilities was a trace-out facility, and it was there were positive animals from the index herd, and that was depopulated. Free range, we've got 23. So if you look at total CWD tests since surveilling for disease, 131,071 tests. The prevalence is 0.06%. This is one of those things where I try to look at this with a complete open mind. When I look at Texas, and I will tell you, the only effect I'm seeing with CWD in Texas is on the producers, is putting a big burden on them. It's the nature of what we do. You choose to breed deer and breed animals in captivity, you know, you're going to be burdened with some regulations. I think that regulations and I think the industry needs to accept some of the burden. I think the regulations need to be reasonable. I'm not sure that we've reached that balance yet. There's that teeter-totter thing that I always look at, is that I can never get it to where it's just level. It's either, you know, not enough, too much, just want to get it level. I'd like to see it in some of these positive herds be kept alive, like I said earlier. I think there's so much we could learn from keeping a herd alive, and let's figure out a model. Gary and I were talking about, you know, the density. You keep them in a, let's keep the density at some level. Let's keep the facility big enough, the density at that level. Maybe keep certain genotypes in there at some level. And this is for researchers to put together. And let's run this out over 5 or 10 years and see what happens. And see if we can't figure out something that will help us to live with this disease, as opposed to I hear it says the scorched earth, the depopping. It breaks my heart. I'll tell you, I depopulated, the only depopulated herds that have been in Texas, I did both of them. And it broke my heart. The first herd, first index herd, we killed 42 animals. There had been a politics. We came in and killed 42, which we considered high-risk animals, and found 3 more. I was like, oh my goodness, we're going to have a bunch of positives in this herd. Came back and killed the rest of the deer, and I want to say it was another 150 animals, thereabouts, not a single positive. And it's gut-wrenching and heartbreaking to euthanize fawns every everybody loves these animals, and just it killed me to kill them. And then depopulated another herd. I want to say there were 50 animals, and they had a positive, and depopulated it, and no more positives came out of that herd. Here's the positive location. You see up in the Panhandle area, what is called the illegal immigrants came in. These are New Mexico elk and mule deer that crossed the border illegally, and they brought the disease with them. Same thing in West Texas. There's no question that migration came from New Mexico into the Waco Mountains here in West Texas. What we don't know is down there in kind of south central Texas, in Medina County area, we don't know where that came from. It's possible, and as much as I hate to say it, there have been folks that do things illegally. There have been folks that have brought deer into Texas illegally. I'm sure there were elk brought in illegally too. So it's possible that there's some, source there that was illegally brought in that we don't know about, and that may be the source of that infection in those animals. So what's next in Texas? We know that CWD does exist, but it's at a very low prevalence level. We're working to develop a surveillance program and managing the strategy. Again, I think it's prudent, and I tell this to deer breeders, and I try to stand on the fence. I get deer breeders that say, show me a deer that's ever died of CWD. Guys, come on, man. We can't use that strategy. This is a disease. How significant it is can be debated, but it is a disease. To go so far to one side to say that it's not even something that we should worry about, hell, it's a reportable disease. I can debate whether it should be reportable or not. One of the things I use for saying it should be a reportable disease is that it's not known to infect humans. Well, then we get the monkey study. Again, a lot of stuff we don't know yet. And I think that when it comes down to the human safety, that's got to be first and foremost. I mean, if there's any possibility this can be, if CWD can be transmitted to humans through the consumption of meat, we've got big things to think about, things to do. Equitable testing between free range and captive. That is, I'm sure y'all deal with this too. We've got 3 to 4 million deer in Texas, free ranging, and we've got 100,000 captive, and we're testing 25% of the captive, but minuscule percentages of the free ranging. That's not fair. You're obviously on a disease that, at least in its early stages, has such a low prevalence. You only will find it where you're looking for it. And it's not fair to find it in captive because you're looking for it there. You mandate that they find it, or that they check for it in captive herds. But this is another one of those things that I try not to pick a fight, but I won't back down from one either. When CWD was first discovered in Medina County, the state came in and came up with a sampling model. Said we need to check these different areas. They call them resource management units, that's what they call them. And they came up with a goal, and it was all based on statistics. That if this is the estimated population in that area, if we check this number of animals, we've got 99% chance of finding it if it exists above a 1% prevalence rate. And we call it the 99-1 model. So in certain areas, they achieved their goal by 130%. They got enough samples to achieve their goal by 130%. But in Medina County, they missed their goal by 70%. On a place that is known to exist, they didn't meet their goal of the surveillance. That's not equitable. It's got to be fair. It's got to be. If you're going to put the burden on the producers, you got to put it on the state too. The disease doesn't care. Continue to use live testing as a tool. I think it's a great tool. I think there's a real place for it in the captive industry. I think it's a way to keep the environment from being too contaminated so we don't overwhelm even those that are least susceptible, most resistant. If we can remove positive animals before they have seeded the environment with a bunch of prions, I think it's a good tool. And hunter participation in surveillance. This is the problem we have. People don't want to find it. And Texas is 97% or so privately owned, and those people don't want to find it on their land because it devalues their property, but it doesn't make the taxes go down. Here's what we do know. Nobody wants it. It was discovered, not created in captive facilities. Been around for decades. It does spread by natural movement, but it can be spread farther by unnatural movement. There's nothing I have a hard time with deer breeders understanding. Is that, well, it's going to spread. Yes, it's going to spread. We already know that. But that doesn't mean that we should be irresponsible and spread it unnaturally by putting animals in trailers. I think that should be a responsible producer. It's never been eradicated. Its effect on populations is debatable. The risk of spreading by unnatural movement can be mitigated by any modern testing. Questions, comments, criticisms? Yes, sir.
Scott, do you think that it would help with these illegal deer if you built a wall?
I would be very much in favor of a wall all the way around Texas and have to pass a screening test before you get in. Both for CWD and other things. Political affiliation, maybe, I don't know.
I really didn't think that up, but I thought it's worth passing on.
Yes. Yes.
I just have a question about, you suggested in the end that population declines are debatable, and I think that that's going to the wayside. At least in the wild, there are studies, 2 specific studies, also in Colorado, showing the same thing. The population declines are occurring as the prevalence increases, and we have a current study going on now in the Cadre area to look at similar things within Saskatchewan. So I think there is evidence coming out, it's new, within the last year, that we're finding more information on this. It's just, it wasn't studied before.
So your side of the debate I'm taking is
I
that...
don't mean it as a debate, I mean it as a fact, that populations are declining.
Okay. Can you explain what's going on in Wisconsin for me? Since they discovered CWD there?
I'm looking at the studies that were done in Wyoming, and in Colorado there's further evidence, and various suggested and led to that information before that populations will decline. And within the game farms is also evidence that suggests that those populations will decline. If you have animals that are 100% fatality, there's no way to get around that. That's a fact. And I think as soon as we embrace the facts and we see them as problems, we can start working on some of them.
Okay. Thank you. What I said in my comment, don't take that I have a side of this debate. What I said is it's debatable, and I sit and listen to facts, and I've not chosen a side yet. I've seen the studies in Wyoming, I've seen the studies in Colorado, I've seen reports coming out of Wisconsin, and I'm looking at that saying, there's debate there. And so I want the facts, and if the facts are that what's coming out of Wisconsin is inaccurate, well then we need to know that, and we can end the debate then. But what I'm hearing from Wisconsin is that since they found it, they've come in and killed massive amounts of animals, the prevalence rate is increasing, but the population doesn't appear to be declining.
If you take the neighboring next door and you look at Illinois, they have done population calls every year for well over 15 years now, I believe, and they've kept that prevalence rate at 15%, less than 1%. When the neighboring jurisdictions stopped their culling program, so Wisconsin had a culling program going on, they stopped that. Their prevalence rate increased after that. And so I think there's evidence to suggest we do have tools on the landscape that we can use to manage in the wild. I'm only speaking for the wild because that's where I come from in terms of speaking with Minister of Environment. But acting on that early is very different than acting on it late. If we were to take those same tools and manage our populations in Saskatchewan, we would likely not have the same, not at all, the same success because we have soil reservoirs now in which Illinois would not have the same soil reservoirs that we have here.
Okay, I'm going to stand by my statement that its effect on populations is debatable because I think we kind of just had a debate. So I think the effect on population is debatable. That's not to say I'm not taking the stand that CWD does not have a negative effect on a population. That's not what that comment means. This is not saying that there are not areas or studies that are are valid studies that have showed declining population, but I also hear things in Wisconsin that, you know, it's counterintuitive in a
I
way.
think time will tell.
I agree.
Here in Saskatchewan, we felt the
Ain't
same.
no debate on that.
We spoke in similar words to what you're talking about in Texas. This is very low, it's localized, and it has changed here. And I suspect Texas will be the same as well as other places too.
And like you said, time will tell. There's no debate on that. Yes.
Would you be able to give us an idea of cost per animal, like if this was to become testing in the future, what it would be costing a producer for each animal tested?
I will tell you how I charge for testing, and we can extrapolate some numbers. It's pure math. I charge by the mile to get to the farm, and I charge by the hour when I'm on the farm biopsying. So cost per head is extremely variable. When I run 55 animals through a chute in 2 hours, your cost per head is less than when it takes 4 hours to tranquilize 10. So I don't know, I will tell you that just the test itself, the lab in specimen jars, it's about $45 an animal. That's all I charge the client. So the lab fees, when I pass on, the way I charge for my services, I charge $3.50 a mile one way to get to the farm. Then I charge $300 an hour while I'm there biopsying. What I tell people is I give them a heads up 30 minutes before I'm going to get there. I said, ask them deer on the ground when I get there. Don't pay me to stand around. I don't want to stand around. I want to get there, get the job done. Some people listen, some people don't. I've had some that are sitting there drinking beer when I show up. Where's the animals? Oh, we're waiting for you to get here, Doc. I can pay by the hour. It don't matter to me. I'm just trying to tell you that.
You said $45.
The test, yeah, plus $45 per animal with lab fee. I will tell you, you can kind of figure an average $150 to $200 a head. By the time you, and again, it depends on whether you're doing running animals through the chute and doing them awake in the chute is the most efficient time-wise, the most economical cost-wise, because you got no anesthetizing drugs in them. So it's actually my preferred method of doing it is to biopsy in the chute. And I've got a crew now that they can hold them rascals down, and we biopsy 3-year-old bucks in the chute. And we get a little western sometimes, but that's what rodeos are about.
I think just to add that as a matter of comparison, I think lab costs, compared country to country, Canada to US, the number is the same. You pay 45 US, we'll pay 45 Canadian for the same test. So you set me up here.
That service call drive up here is going to be hell of a
Is that a state-owned lab that you're using?
Yeah, I had a bright idea. You know what? We'll get some investors, we're going to open up our own lab. And we're going to use the profits of the lab to help us out from an industry standpoint. It's a great idea. It never came to fruition. It's not that easy to get an approved lab. Yes, sir.
Scott, I know that, just some more information, not trying to sway you one way or the other, but I know that when Nick was working on that ranch, that we can't mention the name that Bruce did. He, last spring, found a whole bunch of CWD positive animals by the RT test, and they let him kill all the cows, which proved by the post-mortem test that they indeed were positive. Found a bunch of bulls saying that were positive also, and the owners wouldn't let them kill them. Said, we're going to hunt them this fall. By fall, all those animals were dead.
How old were they?
Huh?
How old were they?
They were varying ages. I don't know, I can't tell you for sure, but all ages in that herd, so I don't know what they were. But anyway, bottom line is in 6 months they were dead. Didn't even make it till the fall. So in it seems like as the disease, the infection rate goes up, the time for these animals they seem to get it at a younger age faster from it. The guys I'm talking to are saying that deer, it's probably about a year, so, or less. in the whitetails. So the other farm I was talking about that found CWD for the first time 4 years ago, and that's 50%. You can assume that that population, that 50% of those animals are going to be dead in the next year. So you do your own numbers on how fast, if that's really affecting your population and so on, how many animals can you put back into it and so on. With captive herds, it's something you can get your arms around. You know exactly how many animals there are, you know what your infection rate is, you know how many are dying and so on. So it's much easier to really figure out what's going on in a captive situation than it is in a wild situation that's going on in Wisconsin. So I think we got to factor in how many animals are healthy animals from outside areas that are coming in and so on. I don't know how to do that.
Again, it goes back to what my statement was. Its effect on populations is debatable, and that's all I said.
Yeah.
Do my point, I hope that you see that I am all in favor of mitigating the risk of spreading it. I'm all in favor of eliminating it as early as possible through some level of testing. I fully believe that if you have CWD and you live long enough, you will die from and or with CWD. That I don't think those are not debatable. Those are facts. You know, if you have CWD and you get hit by a car, you know, did you die of CWD or did you die because you get hit by a car? Did you get hit by a car because you have CWD, or were you just an idiot across the road on busy traffic? You know, again, the ongoing debate that I've been in through many whiskey bottles over the last 10 years about this disease since it's
I'd love to debate this with you.
Sorry?
Chris is up there.
Okay, I just have to add to this debate just a bit, but there's some math here that's not quite adding up, Barry and Catherine. So we talked about infection rates being as high and the animals are dying within 5 months. Now, Colorado has had CWD since '67, which is over 50 years. Now, I don't know if you were to do the math on the rate by now, there should be no hunting seasons. There should almost be no animals left in Colorado, or Saskatchewan for that matter, seeing as how we're over 20 years with CWD, and yet our populations have gone in increases and ups and downs along that way. It should already be happening. Now, you're going to argue saying that it's happening, but we went through our biggest depopulation of our deer probably in my life 5 years ago, and environment has been increasing doe kill numbers, particularly in mule deer in those areas. How do you even come up with an accurate study of that? But I just say, I'm not saying that CWD doesn't kill deer, but something doesn't add up here. 50 years of CWD in a state, and you still have huntable populations. Last year we had, what was the name of the guy from Colorado last year that we had up there?
Wayne East.
Wayne East, and I sat down with him and talked to him. I said, in CWD, he's a hunter. I said, in CWD, where it was found at your research facility, is there still huntable mule deer and elk populations in that area? And he said, yeah, there is. There's lots. So I mean, I don't want to be, something doesn't add up. We've had both sides of the debate. I don't want to give the other side of the debate, so give some people something to think about.
Yeah, again, I'm with you on there. If you want to respond, I'll be happy to hear your response.
Catherine's itching here too, so.
Y'all come up and tag team, that's fine.
You're not very.
But you see my point, the debate goes on and on and on and on and on, that's my point. And I feel like I'm getting defensive on the statement I put up there, but I said its effect on population is debatable. We have a room of whatever, 30, 40 people here, and I'll be goddamn, we didn't get a debate going.
If we could go back to when I started with my talk and where I wanted us to go in my concerns, is first, if we have a problem and we want to solve a problem, first we have to recognize that it is a problem, and we have to recognize the risks, and we have to agree on those risks. If right now we're saying it's debatable, we're not worried about it, let's let time tell, hey, let's leave it, and let's see what Mother Nature brings, but we also have to recognize those risks. Government here is not going to act unless the public is behind it. If we as a public decide we don't want to do anything, then let's not worry about it. But is that the risk you want to take because you want time to tell, where we're gonna be in the future.
I think time was already told, 50 years, how much time do you want?
Okay, it starts very slow. It's about 1% prevalence every year. We are matching around that from the start. We had none in our wild. We had over 1,000 samples. Look at that, in 2003, we had over 1,000 samples, and we had 1 positive. We had less than that, and we have far more positive.
I'm not arguing the
Smaller
positives,
sample.
because positive is an unarguable statement, the population is what we're arguing.
If we're looking at an ecosystem though, those animals, it's not a closed population. If we want to do those kind of studies, we look only within the farm. And you can, what Barry's talked about with population declines on the farm. These are wild animals, they're moving around. You have source sink populations. So animals can move outside and in. You can replenish the population. It's not going to be an equitable all the way across the board that we have population declines and no hunting. It's going to be pockets that we're going to start to see an annual decline in populations. That's the concern. What we'll find out this year, well, in the coming years, Trent has marking animals out there, and he's looking in 2 different areas, so areas that have higher prevalence, similar to what they did in Wyoming, and areas that have lower prevalence, and then we can start to see the difference in population declines or population. Maybe there's nothing, but I doubt that's going to happen.
Sheila?
It's just looking at where we're going to go and what risk we want to take. That's all I ask. If we're going to talk, we need to put it on the table and talk about what we're willing to do. We can't solve the problem if we say there's not one.
Am I working?
Yeah, stand up.
Will that make a difference? But are you guys looking at RT Quick at all down there? Because you maybe missed the Dr. Gilch's talk on RT Quick?
No.
And then Haley's work and Nick Haley's.
Well, I'm following what Nick is doing. This is basically, this is a retrospective look as opposed to this is what we're doing in the future. The one thing I brought in that was the future was the use of anyone testing to reach certified herd status. Because I think that is the gold standard in the captive industry that we should all have strived for. It's frustrating as a producer. I can't go to an auction and buy anything because it'll jack my status up. I've been certified, like this year will be 6 years that I've had a certified herd. There's something like 100, 110 certified herds in Texas out of 1,200. I think if everybody had been doing the same, moving along, and we're all on the same level playing field, I think it's good for the commerce of the industry. But everybody's got to move along. I had producers said, so it's funnier than hell, because not funny, it wasn't funny for the people that got caught up in it, but when the state increased the testing requirements on breeders, we've been required since 2002, we've been required to test 20% of our postmortems. So 1 in 5, 60 months of age and older, we've had to test. And I've had producers do just the bare minimum. I had others that tried to get 100% but didn't. They got 80%. Some of them got 50%. The good thing was when the state first increased the requirements on us, they went from 20% to 50%. Those that were already at 50%, business as usual. Boom and qualified. Then they raised it again to 80%. Those that had been trying to get 100% to achieve 80%, they were business as usual. Those that were at the 20% level, it cost them tons of money to get up to where they were boom and qualified, and or a TC1, transfer category 1, that didn't have a requirement of testing where they released their animals. So, mainly that this is a look back at what we've done, what we're going to do in the future. The only thing I say is that I know that we're working heavy towards is to get the certified herd status off of a snapshot picture of live testing, because we believe, in fact, there was I didn't have it in this program, but if you look at a certified herd program, we've got a model that shows if you've got 100 animals, over a 5-year period, you're going to have 25 tests under the current certified herd program. If you do the one we propose over a 5-year period, you'll have 125 tests. Which is the better surveillance? Which is the better, do you take something that over 5 years, if it happens to have gotten in there or is in there, you know, and you don't detect it because you're only checking your eligible postmortems, and the certified heart program does not have a minimum requirement, which I'm not so sure is good. Believe it or not, there's people that'll cheat. And getting personal now, I think there ought to be, surveillance is surveillance, you know. If you're not actually running tests, you're not doing surveillance. That's the veterinarian speaking to me, and, you know, again, that's putting a significance on a disease that we'll see what happens.
Well, wasn't Gina's question specifically about looking at forward, whether you were going to look at using the RT quick test instead of IHC? Is that what you was the question?
Yeah.
That's my question too. It sounds like
Well, and see, this is when you get to working, that's a question for USDA, okay? It doesn't matter what I think, or, you know, what I advocate for. It's a matter of what they'll accept. And if they're only gonna accept the IHC, then it's gonna be IHC. That gets into, and I'll be honest with you, I think that on the short end, if USDA moves forward with this, on the short end, it'll take 2 years to get done, because they're gonna open up the rule to do it. But my guess from what I've seen, it ain't ever the short end, it's always the long end, and that's a 5-year plus movement thing. So, yeah, that's what we're talking about now, starting it now, and who knows, in 5 years, we may have even more information that we may have to change our way of thinking.
Well, I guess I can only assure you we get the same answer at the federal level.
It's universal.
Back to Barry's.
Matt, thanks for calling on me. Lake was going to sleep, and I wanted an excuse to stand up. Talking about your situation, I want you to consider a couple things. Remember that map that I had up talking about where how far the disease had progressed up until 2000.
Yeah.
So when they first discovered the disease in 67, or they didn't even know what it was. They didn't figure out that it was a prion disease until about 77. But it was confined to a really small area. And then between 67 and 2000, it was confined to a very, very small area. Okay? So after that, that's when it spread, and we're getting a geometric increase in not only the prevalence rate, but the geographic areas of this. So it's not fair to say, man, this disease has been around for 50 years and it really hasn't affected anything. What we're finding out now is it truly is affecting things, and some of the more recent research that's come out indicates that once the prevalence rate reaches about 20%, that you're going to start seeing a population decline. When in Colorado, it's interesting because they've been denying, the Game and Fish have been denying it forever. They won't talk about it. But the last proposal by the staff to the commissioners, which came out just a few weeks ago, stated that we've got 55 deer management units in Colorado. 31 of them now have CWD. To try to make it sound better, they say the average prevalence is somewhere around 10%. Well, the reality is we've got some areas that only got one case in it. We've got some counties, there's some herds that may have 5,000 animals in it, and there's only one case. Okay, but we got other places where there's 80%. What they're now saying is, we got a problem, guys. And in their report, they kind of backhanded and say, our deer herds in these areas may not survive. So I'm just throwing that out as, you know, just some more facts. Once that prevalence rate starts going up, and it's going to spool up slowly, like we've been talking about, this disease progresses pretty slowly, but it is 100% fatal. And
I guess maybe I guess I want to just clarify that I'm not denying that the disease spreads, and I'm separating a wildlife talk from a game farm talk. We know what happens in a game farm because we can check it 100%. So I'm not trying to compare the two. As a hunter and an avid hunter, and as a game farmer, I ride both sides of the fence. So I guess, regardless to me, 40, 50 years is irrelevant because it's a long time even at 40 years. And the area that I was referring to was the area where it started. By now, after 40 years, at a prevalence rate of over 50%, and the average deer not living past a year, there should be no deer. There should be none. It should be zero.
Well, except that you're coming in from a lot of different areas. This is
Okay,
not a, this
okay,
is not a
but-
perk that you get your, I mean, not a situation you get
Okay,
your
but
arms
so
around.
over 40 years, I get that. But we already admitted that the disease is moving outside too. So you've got prevalence rates increasing outside the original prevalence areas. So over a period of time, which maybe it's 100 years, maybe it's 200 years, I don't know, but you're saying eventually they will be gone out of those areas. And that hasn't happened in 40 years or even 30 years or 20 years in Saskatchewan. I just,
But your fecundity rate's too high in the area, and elk will be affected. And I agree with Elizabeth, you know, you watch what happened, exactly what Barry said in the States, what happened in Saskatchewan, what's happening in Alberta, you watch the prevalence. It'll be interesting to see what happens in Texas, Scott, because you've got a 0.06 infection rate in Alberta. The biggest challenge we've got as game farmers is not what's happening inside the wire, it's what's happening outside the wire. You watch Alberta where we had our first positive in 2005, so we had our 0.05%. And you keep monitoring, and in Alberta, they're a rich province, so they test every head in that particular endemic zone, they call it. And now they're talking 8.3% infective rate in mule deer bucks, and I know that's hunter harvested and it's high. The problem is they didn't do anything about that. The wildlife agencies, they manage a trophy deer population, mule deer population in Alberta, and there's, 10 years ago, my buddies would go down to WMU 147 and 150, and there'd be 50 or 60 or 200 4x4 bucks running around. And if they would have pounded on them, they could have had an effect on it. But now we're living in a time, no different than myself, a game farming career, where we had challenges. I remember in this exact, capital in Saskatoon, where we were here in 96, we had a first positive. Well, 22 years later, we're still dealing with the disease. But unfortunately now, in the wild around us, the infective rates got up to the point where it's becoming a dramatically bigger challenge. And, I think I've got a little different opinion. It's here to stay. It's only going to get worse. But I think the deer industry, the wild deer will be around because your fecundity rate's so high. Your young deer will breed to the point where they get positive and die off. I don't know what's going to happen with the wild elk. I think it'll be, affected worse. But we've got way more infective challenge right now against our industry than we had even 10 years ago. It's changed dramatically in Alberta and Saskatchewan.
And that's the point that I guess I like about animal testing is one of the things, it's here to stay, it can't be eradicated, we need to mitigate the risk of its spread, and this is a tool that can be used. That is the underlying thing of my entire presentation, is that this is a tool that can be used to mitigate the risk of spread and or diminish the number of prions being put in a captive environment. And that's how we learn to live with it. What I really don't like seeing, it kind of saddens me that we even get into this, pushback back and forth. Is it not? Is it not? And unfortunately, anytime this particular topic comes up, we get into that pushback. And really and truly, it's not I don't think there's a debate of whether or not CWD kills cervids. That's not debatable in my opinion. I mean, as a damn veterinarian, I know that the disease will kill them. I get that. I ain't seen it. I'd like to see it just to say that I had maybe. Hell, I never saw screwworms. I was born after the screwworm effect. You talk about wiping out a population. Screwworms about eradicated deer in Texas, back in the probably the 50s, 40s and 50s. We can get off it. Let's get back to the, what can we do to move forward and not look back and not get into this pushback of, captive versus free ranging, and the regulatory folks want to push on real hard on the captive people because we're the root of the problem of CWD, and we're not. We get all offended and push back saying it's not us, That's why I think we can come in and say, that's one thing I like about what Texas has done is we've tested a lot of captive deer. And so far, it's not a huge problem statistically in the captive industry. It seems to be in one central locale in the captive industry. How it got there, we can debate that one too.
I got one question. Yeah. Retrofrangal no biopsy on elk. Is that a feasible option? I know you glossed it over, and I remember Bird's presentation in Texas, they kind of said, well, we don't think it's a good idea. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. Again, there's no question in my mind that I could go in on an elk and surgically get a biopsy. Can I get the elk to live after I'm done? I have to try and find out. It's a challenging procedure.
The reason I bring it up is that we have no approved test in Canada, okay? Something that we could get approved probably very easily is that test because of, like I said, it is a gold standard test. We don't have to worry about RT quick. If we can get a sample that works, there is an application for it. You know, be it a small one, like I said, Randy ships a bull of somebody's place, it shows up at CWD, does Randy want to test every animal on his farm? No, he wants to test his good bulls, whatever. There's limited use for it, but important.
Yeah, I think it's another one, I call it those half metric wrenches in my toolbox, you know, 11.5 millimeter wrench. I don't need that very often, but when I do need it, I don't think I got it in my toolbox. So I call that the lymph node biopsy. It's kind of the same thing. There's going to be a time when you're going to have that perfect bull. It's going to be that LL, well, I'm not an L guy, but you know, I'm looking at white word, I'm saying I've got my, 30-inch wide, 30-inch main beam, 14-inch G2 mainframe 8x8, typical, that I just paid a lot of money for, that CWD was found where I got it from. If I can come in and lymph node biopsy that deer and get it cleared, even if I got to do it twice a year apart, money well spent. But will that work down there? I don't know. I haven't practiced.
When you're available.
Kind of cold out there right now. Everyone tools.
I think maybe we hit a little wall here. We're kind of at the point where we were going to take a break anyway. We'll maybe do that. Like I said, we've got the open panel, open session here yet where we can catch and bring more questions. So on that happy note, we'll